Don't start that. Yeah.
It's just like this weather is. I remember, I don't know, maybe it wasn't last spring break, but there's been a few spring breaks where the weather just is like perfect the week before, and then like the week of spring break, it's just like raining every day or like really cold or whatever. I feel like it just does that on purpose. And also, there's a full moon this week, so the kids are going to be crazy at home. Just, I feel like they planned it like on purpose. Like, get the kids out of the school this week, put them in their homes.
And I think that is legit, because I've heard teachers say
about the full moon.
Yeah, I've heard teachers say that the students are acting crazier than normal, and then they find out, oh yeah, it's a full moon.
Oh, yeah. My wife's an educator. She says the exact same thing.
Like, nurses and doctors, they'll say the same thing.
Like, what is like? So the full moon brings in the tide, and it also brings in like
the crazies
within you, and unless everyone has like werewolf kind of in them or something. And it's the full moon that kind of.
We were all created. That's in the Genesis creation story. Is about the werewolves.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
No, it's in Genesis when he made the moon, and anytime it's full.
Sorry.
Sorry, parents.
Day 6.5.
I think that's in the book of Hesitations.
Yes, you know about the book of Hesitations?
Yes, indeed.
Yes, I quote from it all the time. Yes. I help those who help themselves. All sorts of great stuff in the book of. I like Second Hesitations, but it's really good. Well, hey everybody, welcome to the This Day podcast.
The This Day podcast?
I mean the Next Day podcast.
Well, the Whatever Day podcast.
Let's not get into this.
Yeah.
This or next week or day. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That discussion. But welcome to the Next Day podcast, the next day on your discipleship journey.
The This Day in your discipleship.
The This Day.
That's what that one needs to be. Speaking of This Day, it's been exciting that we've recently started sharing the This Day podcast on YouTube. So you can find it on the on our church's just main YouTube page. Our church has 20 YouTube channels.
There's
so there's just
public,
St. Peter's. There's
yeah.
just St. Peter's, but then there's the Element one, there's the West Campus one, and traditional one. That's where you watch all the services. But there's just a St. Peter's one. And since we started posting our This Day podcast on there, and this has been on there too, and other things, people have been listening to it. So maybe it's just an easier place to listen to. So I don't know.
We got people who YouTubers out there,
Yeah. Oh, we could call ourselves YouTubers now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. No, because we're not appearing on it. It's just our voices.
That's right.
And
That's right.
Anyways. But yeah, glad you all could join us for the Next Day podcast, where we're going to be talking about the sermons that you maybe got to hear on Sunday. If you didn't, that's why you get to come here and you get to listen to it. And you can listen to the sermons on the podcast. You can listen to Christie at the Element, Morris at Traditional Service, and Pastor Carl over at West Campus. So we're talking about Feast, and we talked a little bit about this, and I want to give an update on this. This is the best time of year because it's fish sandwich season. This is when all your fast food places and everyone's going to be advertising fish sandwiches and all that. And so last week I talked about how great the Arby's sandwich was, and then Christy, what was your text you got from one of our loyal listeners?
I got a text from one of our loyal listeners named Faye Pie.
Yeah.
And hello, Faye. Shout out to you.
I know.
But I shared it with Chad. That she said that she tried the fish sandwich from Arby's because you, Chad, just sang its praises so highly.
And did she
say, said it was good.
It is good.
They have the meats.
Yes, the fish meats. It is so good. And by the way, on Ash Wednesday, I went to Whataburger. I was getting their fish sandwich. And right when I was in the drive-thru, there's a lady out there taking the orders. And she saw me and she goes, "All right, so I'm guessing you want the fish sandwich?" And I was like, does she listen to the podcast? Who is she? But then she saw the ashes on my forehead, and I was like, oh.
That is hilarious.
Okay. All right. So Arby's is now, I guess they're one of our sponsors. So if you want a fish sandwich, go to Arby's.
Oh, my gosh.
There you go. All right.
We could say we have the grace, they have the meats.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
There we go.
You are, you're really missing a calling in living like a coastal town, you know, like living in a coastal town where you just like, there's fish out the fresh caught. I feel like you love fish, and that is.
It is great. Yeah. It is.
I just don't love it. I wish I did.
I wish I did too. It's better for you.
Not even like catfish, like fried catfish.
I don't know. When I watch survivalist shows like Alone, like Justin and I will start like craving fish because they're just like, I don't know, we're watching these people surviving, and then they catch a fish and they roast it over a fire, and they're just like, oh yes, this is the best thing I've ever had, and we're like, we should eat more fish. But like then I make it and I'm like, it's just not. I don't know.
It's not the same.
It's not the same.
No.
Yeah, I know. I know. Like Sable doesn't like fish if it's too fishy.
Yeah.
Tasting, which I'm like, it's almost like I don't like chicken if it tastes too much like chicken. It's like, but I guess it does have a taste. Anyways, we're not going to talk about that all day. Let's get to
Welcome to the fish podcast.
Yeah. Yes, the fish sandwich podcast.
Oh,
Let's do that.
No,
Maybe by the end of Lent, I'll give y'all my updated list. I already have kind of a list of favorite places to go, but I always try to update it.
Chad's fish sandwich list.
Fish sandwich list.
Oh my gosh.
Anyways, all right. So Morris, we're gonna let you choose. I have 3 cards here. We have 1, 2, and 3. Which one?
Middle.
Middle. Number 2.
Have you chosen 2 every time?
I don't know.
Maybe.
I think he's chosen 2 every time.
We'll have to go back and listen.
Yeah,
all right, here we go. What is your favorite fish sandwich?
Oh my gosh.
No.
That's what all 3 of them say.
I know it is.
Yeah.
And what is your favorite fish sandwich, and why is it Arby's? You know. So, what is the worst chore in the house? What is the worst household chore to do?
That's easy.
It's easy for you?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know what it is.
All right.
Oh, it's weeding the front flower bed.
Oh.
Oh, that's like probably Christie's favorite.
Hate it. Drives me up a
So
wall.
pulling the weeds in the.
I just I'll mow. I'm happy to mow. Happy to weed eat. Happy to all that stuff. But I just weeding the front flower bed just drives me up a wall. I do it. I don't like it.
Mine is dusting. It feels like so pointless. It's like you need to, because it's like, oh, there's dust has collected here. Wipe it off. But literally, like later that day, it's just like there's dust again. It's just like it's literally like the definition of insanity.
Yeah.
Doing something over and over and expecting different results.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we dust? Why?
Yeah.
But my whole family has allergies, so I have to.
I know. Yeah. I don't have any. Sable does them all. So, no, I'm kidding. That is so not true.
He's like, redact.
I redact.
Yeah, send your emails to Chad at...
And if y'all see Sable at church, please do not tell her that. Please don't come up, because several people came up to me saying how much they appreciate the butt dust comments.
Oh, yeah.
We are butt dust.
Oh my gosh.
But don't come up and say, "Oh, did you hear what Chad?" Okay. I'm trying to think of which one actually really bothers me and annoys me. And this one is very particular, because it's not just emptying the dishwasher. It's emptying Tupperware from the dishwasher.
Because it gets like the water gets stuck in all
So
the little.
there's water, so it's like then I have to dry it, and then it's like I have to try to, the way we have our Tupperware, we don't just have one set and everything. It's like a mismatch of all sorts of Tupperware, different lids, different everything. And something about me taking it from the dishwasher, putting it in with the rest of them with the lids. I don't know, something about it. I'm just like, I hate it. I hate this. I hate this.
Well,
like
it's never like
it's not the plates. It's not the silverware. It's not anything else unloading. It's just the Tupperware. I'm like, I don't know why I just get irritated unloading these. I don't know what it is.
Well, and it's like you put it in the cabinet. Does anyone have like a well-organized Tupperware cabinet? No one in the world does. Like, how can you? It's all different sizes and
just like your dust. I remember being at my grandparents' house, and my grandmother had like every single model of Tupperware you could think of, and all this stuff, and we would always organize it by size and all this. And guess what happened? The next day, it was just
that was
the order just got messed up.
Her organizational method looked like chaos to you.
I remember seeing a life hack that you remember the old CD racks.
Oh, yes.
And you could get the Tupperware lids and lay them in there.
That's just the lids, though.
Yeah, just the lids.
That's only,
everything
that
else
only
you had to
one
stack.
Thing.
And
Oh, yeah, agreed. I don't like that either. But Tupperware, that stuff air dries. Just leave the water. Don't dry it off. It's
Amen.
fine.
Preach it, sister.
Well, all right. Well, those are our household chores we do not enjoy doing.
But we're thankful for our homes and everything that we have.
Yes.
Turn it to gratitude.
Well, let's get to our sermon. We started off the first sermon for the Lenten season in this new series, going over the feast and festivals and the Bible. What is it called? It's called
Feast of the Bible
Feast
or
on this?
Feast on this. We missed an opportunity
Wow.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. But feast, what's it called? Feast
Feast of the Bible.
Feast of the Bible. All right, just simple.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
call it what it is. And so this series, we're going to be looking at different feasts and festivals and these kind of things that we read that is mentioned several times, whether it's in the Old Testament, we see it being recognized in the New Testament, and you may be wondering, like, I don't know what any of this is. Some of these may be familiar. So I know when I was talking with students, I mentioned Passover. All of them seem to kind of have an idea of like, oh yeah, isn't that where the plague, and isn't that where the lamb's blood, and isn't that, so they had an idea of it. But then you get into like Feast of Booths and Feast of Trumpets and Feast of Unleavened Bread. And it's like, here's all these ones that you may, wait, I don't really know about that. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to be looking into those. So this last Sunday was our first Sunday of it. And so we did look a little bit at the Passover. And it's like you can't help but talk about the Passover because when you talk about the unleavened bread, they kind of go together.
Right.
But yeah, we talked about the Feast of Unleavened Bread. I should have just asked y'all, what's y'all's favorite unleavened bread? That should have been our...
Lots of matzah.
Lots of matzah.
I actually got to say that yesterday. It's my favorite part of the service when I got to say she baked a lots of matzah.
Lots of
It's great. It's great.
And we will get to that because I'm excited to hear about that yesterday.
Yeah. Speaking of matzah, I always like sharing this story. Several years ago, Sable was working for the Jewish Community Center in Houston, and her boss invited us over to a Seder meal for a Passover meal. And so we were actually, having this with a Jewish family, and it was a really great experience.
Yeah.
But then whenever we were eating it, and they just kind of asked us, so what'd y'all think of the matzah? And we're like, oh yeah, it was good. Yeah, we enjoyed it. And they said, spoken like true Gentiles. And they just said, we all hate it. We all hate it. I don't know if that's true for every Jewish family, but they're just like, yeah, of course y'all would say y'all like it because y'all don't eat it all the time.
I was telling Justin, I was like, matzah, it's made with like flour and olive oil and water and salt, like are essentially the ingredients to it, I think, unless I'm missing something. But he was like, that sounds great. I would love that. I was like, I know it does. Like, it sounds good. I made like sourdough crackers, which is technically, the leavening has not actually like leavened. So it's like unleavened sourdough because it's made with not the active sourdough starter, but with the inactive sourdough starter. And it's so good. And it's literally just flour and water and salt. And you can just like top it with whatever you want. Sometimes I just put salt as a topping on it. And they're really good. It's technically unleavened crackers, bread, and it's delicious.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I baked some unleavened bread yesterday in the sermon, which was completely ridiculous, but was so much fun. And that was my recipe, except they had me add a little bit of sugar to it.
Oh, okay.
And but it's still I had some other people bake some, and they did a great job. Mine was not that great.
Did you serve yours that you baked?
I did not.
You say that with such strong conviction.
I know, yeah. I wasn't about to voice that on anybody.
Did you try it?
I did.
Was it good?
No.
Like good, like not as good like regular matzah, or just like especially not good for matzah?
Yeah, I mean it was okay. It didn't have much flavor, and it may have had to do with how hot the toaster oven could get.
Yeah.
But it didn't like turn into the cracker.
Okay.
It was more tortilla like. And actually I'm dissonant. It wasn't that bad, but it just wasn't that good. But it was fun doing it. So yeah, I added a little sugar though. That's what they recommend.
So let's talk about this. So how'd you do it? You just like, as you're preaching, you're just like kneading or like stirring.
Wait, so you made it in front of people?
I did.
This was like the Food Network.
I thought you brought it.
No.
Food Network meets
So
Sunday
you made
sermon.
it there in front of everybody. So it was like your own cooking show.
I had a table set
Cooking
up
with
with
Morris.
a toaster oven on it, and I had all the stuff. And while I was preaching, I put it together. And now,
Do you have a chef's hat?
I did
apron,
not. But I want you to know, I did find on Amazon, and I did not order it because I chickened out. But I found an apron that had matzahs all over it.
Wow.
And I started to order it.
You should have
It had
ordered it.
lots of
Put it
matzah all over it.
Did you get the flour on your robe?
No. I didn't wear my robe on purpose for that very reason. And here were my cheats. Okay, this is how I cheated. And that is I mixed all the dries in advance and put it in a container. Mm-hmm. And then I measured out my my oil and put that in a container. And then I measured out my warm water and had that in a container.
So this was like a legit cooking show where it's like, and then you add a cup of water.
So
and you just
No, yeah, and if you're trying to follow along at home, it's like,
You're
wait,
like, hold
they
on,
already
hold
have it
on.
all done, and it's like,
so I didn't have to think.
Yeah.
And also, while I was cooking it, I never talked about it.
Oh, you were just talking about.
I was preaching, but clearly they figured out what was going on.
Did you practice this?
I practiced about half a dozen times.
I was going to say, there's no way I could get up there and be doing like something else and be preaching my sermon.
Yeah.
I mean, I barely am able to just preach the sermon without doing anything else.
Yeah.
so people listening to your sermon on the podcast without any visual, would they know a difference?
Probably not.
Okay.
There's a couple. There's like when I put it in the oven, I think I may have just made a comment. Well, we'll see how this turns out.
You use an easy bake oven, by the
whatever.
way.
Yeah.
Gosh, jealous.
But yeah, no, I made the decision not to turn it into a cooking show.
Yeah.
And but what I wanted to do was I wanted them to see it being made, and then what I really cared about was it being made because I was able to talk about, for example, the absence of a smell.
Right.
And so I wanted to sort of use that as an illustration.
Yeah.
And but also the more I thought about it, the more enamored I became with just the idea of saying, I want to see if I can really do this.
Yeah, I get that. And you did.
It was fun.
That's great.
I would imagine just this kind of nice, soothing, almost like a Bob Ross kind of thing. And it's just like,
Yes.
and now we're just going to add a little pinch of this.
Yeah.
And now, this reminds me when I'm out on my bike in the countryside and I'm thinking about what God's done for me. All right, now we're just going to add a little bit of
Listeners,
And so then
Chad is pretending to stir
I'm
right
stirring
now
right
as
now.
he's speaking softly.
And then I'm like in a big bowl here.
But there was sort of this talking in the kitchen vibe that I didn't really expect.
Oh, that's
like
nice.
when I had it all in the bowl and I had my wooden spoon and I was stirring, and I think there was this one point where I sort of picked up the spoon and kind of,
Started kind of launching
then,
at everybody. The dough's going at.
And then when I was making it into a ball with my hands, I was definitely aware that I'd sort of stop and I'd have the, and I was gesturing with the ball.
Oh, that's so good.
And it was just, and it sort of had this, we're just in the kitchen talking sort of feel to me.
Well, I wonder if I bet that came across too. If you feel that, I feel like usually the congregation, picks up on that too. So I bet that was kind of the vibe, which I imagine being just so nice and refreshing. I wish I could have been there in person to experience.
I wanted to try it.
Yeah, it was fun, and so.
So what is this whole thing with unleavened bread? Why is there a festival of it? What can y'all tell us about the festival? Is it Feast of Unleavened Bread festival? I keep throwing in.
They refer to it in both ways.
Okay.
I mean, technically, it doesn't seem like much of a feast when you're like, it's like you just can't. It's just this unleavened bread. They do eat other things, though. It's not like they can't
it's not
have.
Like they only eat.
That's right.
Yeah. They eat
bread.
other things. They just can't have any leavening in their bread or in their homes, right? But yeah, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, like you said in the beginning, is very connected to Passover. It kicks off basically with Passover, and then it is a 7-day long feast and ends with the Feast of the First Fruits, which we're going to talk about next this coming Sunday.
This Sunday.
This next Sunday.
Next Sunday.
I don't know why there's so much confusion on it.
This
Sunday.
People's definitions, we all have different ones. Or some of us have the same ones.
Words matter.
I think
Words matter.
Carl's the only one who...
March 16th, we will talk about.
Yeah, there you go.
The Feast of
March
the First
16th of 2025.
Of 2025 at 10:30 and 9 o'clock in the traditional service. So anyway, but basically, like, the tradition has it now in Jewish culture, really, where, and for many years has had, where you remove the yeast from your homes and from the bread and all of that. And that's sort of like this kind of this act of like repentance and renewal and sort of like, an act that symbolizes removing sin from your life. So the yeast kind of represented sin. But the Feast of the Unleavened Bread initially really originated because it was kind of a remembrance of the Exodus story when the Jews were leaving Egypt, and they basically just didn't have time to put yeast into their dough and let the dough
they
rise.
have time to let it rise and
before they were escaping into the wilderness. And this was after the 10th plague. Pharaoh had said, okay, you guys can go, but it was like before Pharaoh changed his mind. It's like they had to just basically like get out of town real quick.
Oh, baby, let my people go.
Yeah.
Pharaoh.
A little VBS moment there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Why didn't we sing that?
I know. Gosh, we really should have missed a moment. So anyway, basically, they had to take, whatever the bread and to make their bread, and they're going into the wilderness, so they had to make their bread without leavening and bring it with them on their trip, because it's not like they can stop at a gas station on the way out of town, like they're bringing their food and everything with them, so they bake up their bread without the leavening in it, hence unleavened bread, matzah, and
if matzah means
unleavened bread.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go out into the wilderness, and we know the rest of that story. But it's really interesting, like the origins of this. I think until I started really digging in and researching this, I didn't realize that God had instituted this as a feast, like annual feast, and remembrance before the 10th plague ever even happened. And I just think that's so interesting.
That is amazing.
People are like, wait, what are we doing this for?
Yeah.
It's like, he's like, this is about to happen.
Yeah.
Warning you what to do with Passover, right? And he's like, but then for 7 days, you will not eat any leavening in your bread. And you're going to do this like every year in remembrance of the way that I, with a mighty hand, saved you out of Egypt. And it's like, gosh, that's got to have that's like some kind of assurance there, of like, okay, this hasn't even happened yet. And God is saying, you're going to remember this every year,
That's good.
But could that be also like just kind of when about like Exodus was maybe written and then like they already celebrated it, so they kind of added it? But it is interesting, like they do put it there because it hasn't happened yet.
Right,
like,
right.
Because people, why are we doing? Oh,
Well, and maybe even to that point, like if it's an edit from the authors, later on, that they are recalling the way that like their ancestors who had come out of Egypt retell the story, like the faith that they had in God, that before it ever even happened, that they knew God was going to rescue them out of Egypt. It's interesting. It's like the same people that are then in the wilderness, like, you brought us here to die, God.
Yeah.
Fickle people.
Yeah. No, but whenever we talked about that with Sunday school with our students about what is leaven and unleavened and all this. And one of our Sunday school leaders says that he on Christmas he hand makes cinnamon rolls, and he says like the whole night before he lets the dough rise, like, and that's what makes it all fluffy.
Yeah.
And then I think he told his son, is like, now can you imagine if I didn't let them get fluffy, and like, do you think it would be as good? And he was just, no. So, but like, imagine like it takes the time to rise. So like when they were when they had to leave, they didn't have time to let it. So they just had to go quickly.
Yeah.
And I also thought like, is there any correlation to this to like the manna?
Yes, actually, in the in the traditional celebration of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that's another thing that they're celebrating. They're reminding is that like that God was going to provide for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like they had to leave with just this unleavened bread.
Yeah,
nothing, whatever they had in their homes. But once they ran out, right. And so as they go into the wilderness, God provides for them with the manna. And so it is a remembrance of all of that too.
How come there's not a festival of quail also? Like, it's just,
maybe can
we do no quail. Do the unleavened bread thing. But we want the quail. No, you can't enjoy this.
The flour's cheaper, you know? Yeah.
Well, one of the things I loved that we got from our meeting with the rabbi.
Yes.
Yeah. So y'all got to meet with a rabbi about all these things.
Yeah.
Yes.
And one of the things I loved that he said was that in their observance of it today, that they want to do it in a way where they're not just remembering what happened, but they become a part of the story. That, like, particularly he was talking about this in relation to Passover, that, it's us who need to get out of Egypt. It's us who are being freed from oppression, and that we're the ones that are experiencing that. And I thought that was just really powerful. And one of the things that I picked up is that, as I understand it, in the modern Jewish observance of this, that they only have 18 minutes to bake it.
Right.
Did you get that?
Yeah.
Yeah. From the time they start gathering the ingredients to the time it comes out of the oven, they have to do it in 18 minutes.
Did you do it in 18 minutes?
And it was less than 18 minutes. It was. Absolutely.
Right.
Mine would have not. Mine would have been like 35.
Yeah. No, it
Christie, it's burnt.
Yeah.
It's on fire.
But it was a way of helping them. That's a way of helping them to experience that sense of urgency, and we've got to get this done, and all that, which I thought was pretty amazing.
I think the difference between an act of recollection and the act of remembrance, because, we think of remembrance as like recollection. Sometimes we're just like recalling this thing that had happened. Remembrance, and I think what this is referring to, what you're talking about, is like remembering who you are, like, how this is intrinsically a part of, us. And I think doing those kinds of things, they are ritualistic, in nature, but it's for that purpose, to kind of, muscle memory almost, to remind ourselves like this is part of our story. This is part of who we are.
And I always love that. Like, I know trying to do this often with like students is just saying, yes, or it's just the idea that, we are continuing, we're a part of this story. That we could read the Bible, and yes, these are events that happened long ago, but we're still living out the story because the Bible's all about God's relationship with God's people. Well, we're part of this story. We're part of this world. We're part of God's creation. And so, and that's one thing with these type of, I love hearing that and that's something I always try to do with even communion, is that it's not just a reminder of the past. And I know a lot of people, this is just symbolic stuff that happened long ago. It's like, no, like something's happening today. This is a reminder, not just of what happened way back then, something happened today. So the Feast of Unleavened Bread, yes, it's a reminder trusting how they trusted God way back then, but what are we doing today? And do we put our trust in God today? So what did y'all do in y'all's sermons to kind of tie this into today? Like, what are we as Christians in the United Methodist Church today supposed to do about the unleavened bread? I don't think the series is trying to tell us that we need to recognize and we need to celebrate these things, but like, what are we supposed to learn from all this?
Well, what I picked up on was this idea that, and you said this earlier, that leaven sort of became an image or a metaphor for sin, which Jesus picked up on in Matthew when he talked about avoiding the leaven of the scribes and Pharisees. And then Paul picked it up in his letter to the church in Corinth when he talked about don't use the old leaven of hatred and, those kinds of things, but the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth and all that. And so for me, where you immediately go is, part of their tradition was not just not eating the unleavened, not eating the leaven, but cleaning the house out. Where, down to the last morsel.
Okay, did you know that this is the origins of spring cleaning?
And, I didn't think about
it. It is.
Yeah.
Because when I was researching this, I was like, is this spring? Because it's the springtime,
springtime.
And I was like, because, they talked about, like, I think we were talking about this, like
the feather and spoon.
Yes. Oh, moving your oven and your refrigerator, like, cleaning, like, every nook and cranny. And I was like,
interesting.
That's what we do with spring cleaning. That's what they say to do with spring cleaning, right? So it originates with.
I did not pick up on that. That's great.
And it also reminded me, I don't think it ties in, but like I just learned like the origins of why we do pancakes for Fat Tuesday.
Yeah, Carl talked about that.
And it wasn't necessarily like to get rid of leaven and yeast and all, but it's just like, but people it would be a time of fasting, so they would use up all their milk and eggs and flour. They would use up all that, and so then they would make pancakes. Yeah. And that was kind of the history of why. Today it's just like, I don't know, just pancakes. Yeah. Pancakes for dinner is kind of fun. Like, I don't know. Yeah. But it's almost, whenever you shared that, Christy, during your sermon, I was just like, yeah, sounds like that pancake thing I just learned about.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. But so where I went with it, you may have done the same thing, was that just as they cleaned their homes, particularly during Lent, we're cleaning up our hearts and our lives and getting real about, what's going on there, and being honest with God about our own sinfulness and seeking God's forgiveness, and we can be renewed and redeemed people, particularly as we anticipate Holy Week and all that goes with that. So that's what I did with it.
Yeah, we got to clean out, clean up our hearts, but we should still dust. We should still clean up the weeds in the front flower beds.
We hate it.
So make sure y'all do.
The actual, put yourself into the story. I thought it was interesting, just the spring cleaning thing, how that originated in something religious, like in faith circles, and it's become very like secularized. And we refer to it. We maybe do that and didn't realize that was meant to be part of a spiritual practice, which is interesting. And that, so many things can be a spiritual practice. You can clean your house and it's in this, in your heart, like this is a spiritual practice. Like they do.
Monks, like there used to be a thing with monks, like with cleaning and chores, like it was always a time of prayer and all their, I did similar to you, talked about the season of Lent as like the season of cleaning house. Like that's just a really clear thing. And it's also like really similar timeline too. Lent is intentionally in the springtime.
And, so it's a similar kind of timeline for this. It's a bit longer. We have 40 days to clean our house, not 7, but, I guess you could clean before. You want to have it clean before the 7 days. But I kind of, I did talk about the unleavened bread. I actually went I went a little bit of a different route with the leavening. So I talked about also Jesus' parable of the yeast being like the kingdom of God.
Right.
Yeah, so this is what confuses me. This is what confuses. So Morris mentioned, from Matthew, beware of this yeast and leaven of and he mentioned the Pharisee. Okay, that makes sense to me. You mentioned in Luke, and it's like Jesus does the opposite. So explain this, because he almost makes it sound like it's okay.
My understanding of this is that there, just like sin can permeate everything, and it can, be bad. It gets into everything. We're supposed to clean our house of it, right? In the same way, the kingdom of heaven, the goodness can permeate everything. So it's basically, letting that, that yeast kind of take over and permeate everything, instead of this old yeast of malice and envy and, all the evil that Paul talks about in the letter to the Corinthians. So, it's kind of just replacing the two. But where I kind of eventually got there is the, cleaning house of the leavening. It's the things that we try to, put into our lives to puff ourselves up or to make ourselves like God, or we don't need God, that's sort of, what sin does, right, is that it makes us, separates us from our need of God, separates us from God, right? So cleaning house of all of that, and then presenting ourselves as unleavened bread, like Paul says, right? Coming to God and to each other as this unleavened bread. But the thing that I'm very cognizant of is also that we're not made to be not, plain. I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for. Unextraordinary. We were made in the image of God, right? So God made us to be not just this flat unleavened bread, right? But what the Holy Spirit does is, when we let the kingdom of heaven take a home in us, that is what, raises us up, and makes us into a new creation. So basically, it's not the leavening that we're putting in. We're letting God put in the leavening, and the kingdom of heaven is, like that yeast.
So don't be like the bread that Morris made. Be like other good bread.
Well,
right?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's we present ourselves humbly to God, but in the same way that the Israelites left in the Exodus story, right? They left with the unleavened bread, because that's all they had time to bake, but trusting God, that God's going to provide, that God's going to do a miracle, that God's going to, take them, into the promised land, that same kind of trust and faith. We present ourselves as unleavened bread like that, humbly to God, and let God be the leavening, let God be, the yeast that raises us up into something new. So yeah, that's where I kind of wove that in there, which was a little less, I guess, Lenten. I mean, still Lenten, clean your house, but I'm proverbially clean your house, or actually clean your house if you need to do that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a metaphor, it's an image, and you can sort of do different things with the same metaphor, the same image. And I picked up on the idea that the leaven, it makes the bread get puffed up. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be puffed up before God. Mm-hmm. Also, I talked about how the leaven or the unleavened bread ain't all that great. Mm-hmm. And I did make it a point to say, compared to the holiness of God, we're not all that great.
Right.
Because I think that's true.
Well, and this is what you're talking about, where Jesus is referring to in Matthew, the leavening of the Pharisees, right? Because they're puffing themselves up. Look how good we are.
That's right.
Rather than being this humble in spirit, coming before God and saying I know I'm not worthy, but you call me worthy, and that's incredible. And like, Holy Spirit, do what you will, so yeah, I think it all just, what I thought was really, I was just so intrigued by it that like Jesus is a Jew, right? And like, he's speaking to, a Jewish audience and like telling them, oh yeah, the kingdom of heaven is like yeast. And they would have been like, huh?
Yeah.
What?
Huh?
Because they would have known, right? Like most of them would have known. And it's said in so many places in the Torah. So they would have heard this.
Right.
They know that they celebrate this festival and the way that yeast is talked about. So it's like, it was such a radical statement. And I love that it like came after like a radical statement about like the kingdom of heaven's like the mustard seed, and they're like, the mustard seed, like I don't know. It was just one of those radical statements that just really caught me. And especially in the context of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, this really well-known, like it's part of Passover, like every Jewish person would know this. And for Jesus to say, the kingdom of heaven is like yeast, for them to be like,
But that's
what?
the thing we're supposed to stay away from, Jesus. Like, what the heck?
Well,
Right.
it's like, after saying that, who was the hero in the story of the Good Samaritan?
right.
Oh, yeah.
The very last person,
The last person
his
you
audience
think.
would expect to be the hero.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
A
that's really
good
interesting.
Samaritan?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Good stuff.
Yeah. And, no, so that's great. And I loved hearing, you reminded me of another fun fact because we were talking about the spring cleaning thing.
Mm-hmm.
Lent, the season of Lent is the only time of year you're supposed to clean out the lint trap in your dryer. I don't know if you knew that. I only do it once a year.
That is so not
Oh my
true.
gosh, Chad.
Listeners, ignore what
Ignore
Chad
it.
has
You
just
were gonna
said.
burn your houses
Hey,
down.
what she said.
Jeez.
Oh, okay.
My gosh. But did you know that
Okay, for legal reasons, I
Send
have
your
to say, do not do
emails.
that.
That's Chad McKelvin.
Did you know that after 24 washes, you're supposed to wash your lint trap in your dryer?
I didn't know
Wash
that.
it.
Yeah, with
That's
water,
good.
rinse,
Oh.
That's good. No, I always empty mine every time.
every time.
Every time.
You don't mess with that. You
No.
don't mess
It's the
around
only
with that.
You don't
time
mess
of the-
with lint.
It's the only time of year you clean out the belly button with lint. And
Okay, when my mama taught me when you're in a hole, dude, you stop digging.
Okay. Yeah, stop digging in your belly button. You've already got the
my
lint.
Oh,
so.
well, it's been fun, folks.
Yeah, it
And
has been. And also, anytime, and this kept popping in my head because you said it several times, Chrissy. Anytime you said the leavening, I kept thinking of like some horror movie.
Yeah.
The
The
leavening.
leavening. The leavening.
I did talk about my sourdough journey a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Because,
So you didn't do that during the pandemic when everyone else was?
I did. I made a starter.
Okay.
I made because you can make sourdough starter with flour and water. You just like mix flour and water. You let it sit. You feed it every day. It starts to smell horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible because it ferments. So it starts to smell so bad. And then you just keep pouring it off and keep feeding your sourdough starter like over and over, and then it starts to smell like bread. Like it's this great
And when you
smell.
mentioned it, Emmy right next to me was like, "Yeah!"
Yeah.
Like she's like a big fan of it too. She's like, "Yeah."
Well, so we, I had this starter during the pandemic. Successfully made a starter. It was like bubbly, and I was like, "This is awesome!" And then I just didn't know what to do with it, and I was like, I don't know. I'll come back to this later. And I never did. Until much later, I came back to sourdough starter. And, it's like the same thing. You just feed it, and then it gets bubbly, and then you can make the bread with it. So that, like, is the leavening. But it has to be active to be the leavening. The leavening.
is coming.
But I named my sourdough starter Lazarus.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Because it
that's
rises.
good.
It rises.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
I heard someone, when you said that, someone behind me said, "What about Jesus?" I was like, yeah.
Jesus would work too.
Yeah,
I
Jesus.
just felt weird calling it Jesus. And Lazarus is just like so fun to say.
Yeah.
So not that Jesus isn't great to say, but just different, a different vibe.
Bread of life.
Bread of life,
yeah.
yes.
Yes.
I'm sure we're going to talk more about that, the bread of life, and coming weeks as bread is part of feasts. So
It is.
That's right. This is going to be a fun series. When I first came a few months ago, and I'm looking at the upcoming series, going, Feast of the Bible? What?
I know. I wouldn't have thought much about it. I was like, okay.
But what I'm reminded of is the more we can understand, that part of our story, the more we understand the foundation on which our faith is built.
Oh, yeah.
And it enriches our understanding of who we are. And so anyway, I'm excited about getting to be a part of this.
No, and that's exactly the stuff that, because, you'll hear it often where people will say, I'm just not much of an Old Testament. Do we, some people even say, like, do we even really need it? Just New Testament and all that. But to fully grasp what Jesus was saying there in Luke about leavening, like, you wouldn't, like, just like you said, like, you wouldn't understand it without, like, knowing, you don't get the context.
Because that's literally all it says. He just says, like...
Oh, it's short. It's like
short.
It's two verses, and it doesn't explain much.
It doesn't explain it.
Yeah.
So you're just like, okay.
But the people listening were like, whoa.
Yeah.
So that's why it's good to study the Old Testament. So it's to study
and just
the Jewish Bible. And
I do think the last thing I'll say about it, too, is that this is the feast. They were in this... Feast of Unleavened Bread in that time when Jesus was, crucified and entombed, this is what was going on, timeline-wise.
That's right.
Which I just think is so, I just think it's so, like, purposeful that this feast that is about, like, flat bread that doesn't rise, like, represents the, like, removal of sin and, like, just that's the time that Jesus is entombed. And another thing I thought is, like, this is kind of a quiet festival,
It is.
It's like 7 days. You're just like, it's just this quiet. We don't know a lot about it in the Christian culture typically.
But you don't have to work, so that would be great.
Right, but like, it's just like thinking about Saturday. I think about Holy Saturday when I think about this a lot. Just like, this quiet day of, like, I guess that's it, and then you on Easter morning, this miracle has occurred, and I just think that's so, I don't know, it seems very, very intentional that it would be this timeline that that we would have, Jesus would have for everyone cleaned house, right, and allowed everybody to be risen,
And now you are kind of setting the table for next week.
We are.
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Set the table. Nice.
Yeah.
All right, so next week, we're going to continue with this series. We're going to be talking about the Festival of First Fruits.
Right.
Feast of First Fruits, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we hope y'all could join us for that. And let's talk about our ministry shout out. This is going to be an event you're going to hear us talk about, and we're going to reference a couple of times probably, just because it's a big one. And that is on March 30th is CWOW, Church Without Walls. This is it's been a tradition at St. Peter's, but since I've been here, this is like kind of the third year in a row that we're doing it. And basically what it is, do you have the list of different, do you think you could find it?
I could probably pull something up.
I saw an email that said there's like 22 projects they've got set up. So I think there's a whole lot of choices of what folks could sign up for.
So this is a special Sunday. There are some people who will come to church and they'll enjoy it and all that, but sometimes they may be like, we keep hearing about how we need to be, reflecting God's love in the community. We keep hearing about this. When do we do this? And now the church has many opportunities, a lot of serving opportunities throughout the week and all that, but this is a Sunday where you come to serve. You come here, and so we're not going to have just typical worship services. So
come in your tennis shoes.
Yes, come in clothes ready to work, because you're not going to have a typical just sit in a pew and here's this and this and this. We will have a time of gathering, a send-off, a special prayer and all this. But then the rest of that Sunday morning, we're encouraging you and your family and everyone to get involved with one of our many projects with our ministry partners, with places, other organizations, families and people in our community. There's so many other projects to be done. And you and your family can sign up for those right now on our website. You go to stpk.org/events. and you can find it there. And then, Christy, what are just some examples of some projects? Just kind of eyeballing there.
There's, let's see, we've got Christ Clinic is one that's going to be off campus. And
Oh, yeah, and some of these are off campus. Like, so you'll meet here, but then you kind of figure out who you're driving with or caravanning to, and you'll
Clothed
go to
by
these.
Faith. Chad, looks like you've got, you're heading that one up.
They'll be here on campus sorting, like, that's a pretty fun thing. We just get music going. We sort a bunch of clothes for Clothed by Faith. Yeah. And that's for all ages, too.
Shambaya Amani, the farm that is part of the FAM Houston group.
So, Morris, you can go over there and weed.
Yay.
Yeah, your favorite.
What if he actually enjoys it there? He's like, no, I just don't like it in my front flower bed.
Yeah.
That's the only place I don't like it.
It's like I love to clean other people's houses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously, do you?
I do, actually. It's kind of enjoyable.
Okay. My address is...
Yeah.
There's Family Hope hygiene kits. That's going to be at the West Campus. Food pantry restock with Katy Christian Ministries. With another food pantry restock with Family Hope Fulshire. Hope Impacts, we got a group going over there. There's a lot. There's a lot of
There's some projects to get your hands dirty and be outside and to show off your craftsmanship and other things like that. And there's other projects that are kind of more indoor and it just allows us to do all sorts of things like that.
Yeah.
So
if you go to the missions page, so stpkd.org/missions, that is going to be
a more direct way to get to it.
It's a more direct way to get to the Church Without Walls information.
So we mention this now because you can sign up for this now. And it's actually good if you and your family did sign up now to really let us know who's going to be here, how many people we have helping out all these different projects and things like that. So feel free. This can also be a Sunday. What a great Sunday for you to invite somebody to come to the church as well. Maybe you have that one person who's like, I'm just not about sitting down and doing it. Well, come on, like come and serve with us. And maybe this is the start of you learn more about the organization that you're helping out with, and maybe you and your family can find ways to serve them more regularly. Maybe you go and help out with FAM Houston on this particular Sunday, and then for other coming weekends, y'all go out there and y'all just go out there and you learn from them and you enjoy it. So it's just I really love that we are able to do this, and we hope y'all can all join us for CWOW, and we'll have a special next day after that one as we just talk about what we experienced and all that.
So let me ask. So we all gather for worship at what time? Do we know?
I think I think it might be 9.
I would think 9.
Yeah, I think we've done 9 or maybe even earlier the last year. So TBD on that.
Okay, okay. Yeah. And then the projects, I mean, some of them
are earlier. They start earlier, and so a lot of people won't come to the...
If you register, you'll get reminded of...
when it is.
If you do it ahead of time. Now, if you do it the night before, you may not get the information email, but do it ahead of time. Then if you sign up for a particular project, I'm sure you'll be emailed all the information you need about, like, hey, don't meet at the church, meet here instead.
I do think
things like that.
I think all the projects, most of the projects anyway, try to end by about noon.
Okay, that's the other thing I wondered.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
just curious.
Yeah, and then I do know that if you have nursery needs, I think in the past we've had nursery available where you check your kids in and you let them know what project you're going to be a part of, and then you get to can go.
Sounds good. Sounds like fun. I'm looking forward to experiencing this. This will be fun.
It is a lot of fun.
That's going to be your last
Sunday.
Oh, no.
What a way to go out.
You don't even have to do a sermon.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So your swan song sermon with us is going to be the week before. So the 23rd.
Yeah. Actually, Whitney is preaching that day.
So it's next week?
Next Sunday is the last time they got to put up with you.
All right, what are you going to be doing?
Yeah.
Like, what are you?
You heard it here. So if you one last chance to hear a Morris sermon. I don't think he's baking bread next week, but
no, not breaking any bread.
No, it's a first fruit, so he's going to get some barley and he's going to.
No, I barely know what I'm going to say.
Hey,
thank you very much.
Hey,
Chad's preaching.
Yeah, I'll be in the element.
Oh, cool.
And
Paige is preaching at the West
Yeah,
Campus.
Paige
I
is-
Is that
believe.
right?
Yes.
Fun.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
So
good.
So that means, Chrissy,
gonna-
you're not allowed to be on the Next Day podcast next week. You
Okay.
didn't do anything. So, but we are going to try Paige on, and Morris, you're always welcome back. So,
Appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all again for listening to the Next Day podcast, and we look forward to the sermons for next week, and we hope you can join us.
all right. See you next time.
Bye-bye.